Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse us for the delay. Let me just begin by introducing, everybody, all of you here know that we have today with us the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk. And next to the High Commissioner, we have the head of our UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, Matilda Bogner. I'm Ravina Shamdasani. I'm the spokesperson for the High Commissioner based in Geneva with him, and we've been traveling with him. This is only the second official country visit that the High Commissioner has carried out since he took up his mandate on the 17th of October this year. The first visit was to Sudan. We arrived in Ukraine on Sunday morning. We visited areas around Kiev, including Bucha and Irpin. We have met with families of prisoners of war and associations that support them. We've met with UN colleagues. We have also had meetings with the Prosecutor General, with officials from the SBU, the Security Services of Ukraine, with parliamentarians, including the Deputy Speaker and representatives of parliamentary committees. We've met with civil society and human rights defenders based here in Kiev and some who came from other regions. We've also met with the Ombudsman. On Tuesday, we went to Kharkiv and to Izium, where the High Commissioner was able to visit some of the sites of destruction. And there we met with the regional prosecutor in Kharkiv, the head of the regional police, and the head of the the civil military administration. I'll now pass the floor to the High Commissioner. He will deliver an opening statement. Following that, Matilda will speak about the killings report that will also be issued today. And then we'll take questions. Thanks very much. High Commissioner, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thanks very much for coming to this press conference. I've been here now for 4 days in sub-zero temperatures, and I think it's important to emphasize this for those outside Ukraine who may not be aware how cold it gets. I've seen for myself the horrors, the suffering, and the daily toll that this war against Ukraine by Russia has had on the people of this country. I've spoken to the families of prisoners of war who anxiously await news of their loved ones. I've listened to those who shared the pain of parents whose children are on the front line. I heard about the particular plight of people with disabilities and older people who are unable to reach a safe shelter when the air raid sirens go off. I visited the site of a shelled apartment block in Izium, in Kharkiv Oblast, where more than 50 people were buried under the rubble. And in the rubble were the signs of lives cut short by acts of indiscriminate shelling. A shoe, a piano, toys, a closet full of clothes, shelves of books. I talked to a woman who showed me her destroyed apartment block, where all her neighbors, now dead, used to live. I had to spend time in an underground shelter on Monday, as at least 70 missiles were launched across Ukraine, again striking essential infrastructure and knocking out power. A group of human rights defenders joined us calmly, and we carried on with our meeting, as if it was normal to have your day interrupted by these sirens. It is not normal, and it must not be normal. I fear that there is one long, bleak winter ahead for Ukraine. The consequences of the war on the enjoyment of human rights for people in this country have already been devastating. And the prognosis is very worrying. You heard this yesterday from Martin Griffiths, the emergency relief coordinator, when he reported to the Security Council. Some 17.7 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. 9.3 million require food and livelihood assistance. A third of the population has been forced to flee their homes. Some 7.89 million have fled the country, the majority of whom are women and children. And 6.5 million people are internally displaced. This means lives are uprooted. Humanitarian aid plays, of course, a vital role to provide support to the most vulnerable, including older people and people with disabilities. providing an adequate social security net to the most vulnerable needs to be prioritized. Each day, we receive information about war crimes. The scale of civilian casualties, as well as the significant damage and destruction to civilian objects, including hospitals and schools, is shocking. And I saw that yesterday myself in Izum. During winter, this has horrible consequences for the most vulnerable. They're struggling with blackouts, with no heating or electricity going on for days. And we have also information that continues to emerge about summary executions, torture, arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, and sexual violence against women, girls, and men. In relation to continuing reports of ill treatment, torture, and execution of prisoners of war, my office issued a statement in mid-November raising serious concerns about that were based on our findings. We will continue to follow this issue closely. Prisoners of war, it has to be said, must be treated humanely at all times from the moment on they are captured. This is a clear, unequivocal obligation under international humanitarian law. Prisoners of war who are suspected of committing war crimes or having committed war crimes should be prosecuted in line with international standards. However, international law prohibits prosecuting them for mere participation in hostilities. In my visit on Monday to Bucha, north of Kyiv, I saw the visible trail of destruction left following the Russian forces' departure from the town in March. Bullet holes on the walls of houses. The town was retaken by Ukrainian forces within less than 4 weeks, but 6 months on, the trauma of so many who lived terrified through that period, and others who lost loved ones remains palpable. Our presence here, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, headed by Matilda Bogner, is issuing today a report that details the killings of civilians cutting firewood or buying groceries. The report documents the fate of 441 civilians in parts of 3 northern regions, Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy, that were under Russian control until early April this year. Bucha was the town hardest hit, and I saw it myself. We are working to also corroborate allegations of additional killings in these regions, as well as in parts of Kharkiv and Kherson oblasts that were recently retaken by Ukrainian forces. There are strong indications that the summary executions documented in the report constitute the war crime of willful killing. The victims and survivors of these violations have a right to truth, to justice, and to reparation. Accountability must be ensured as soon as possible. It is important to put in place also programs early on to provide compensation to victims and survivors to fill the gap until those who are responsible meet their obligations. What has also been deeply alarming is the questioning of international humanitarian law. We must remember that this area of law that governs the conduct of hostilities emerged following the brutal Battle of Solferino in 1859 and was codified in the wake of the horrors of 2 world wars that started on this continent. And let us not forget the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We will celebrate it on the 10th of December, this week. That declaration was drafted in direct response, and I quote, to the calamities and barbarous acts experienced by the peoples of the world during the Second World War. International humanitarian law is an important achievement of humanity and an obligation. My plea is to everyone engaged in hostilities to respect it fully, especially in the most difficult, most emotional circumstances. International humanitarian law is stronger than its violation by any state. A violation by one party does not legitimize violations by another. I urge justice for all victims, whoever they are, with respect for their dignity and humanity. The imperative for accountability is not altered by the affiliation of the victim or the perpetrator. All allegations of violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law by whomever and wherever committed must be promptly investigated and brought to justice under a fair and independent legal process. Such an approach is also essential to strengthen the rule of law in Ukraine. As one human rights defender who I met this week said, it is crucial for Ukraine to hold on tight to the values of a free society, grounded in respect for the rule of law and human rights, including the freedoms of expression, the rights to a fair trial, the freedoms of religious belief, the right to social security, the whole host of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, and not to lose them in the fog of war. I impressed upon my counterparts the need to keep a constant eye on the vision for the day after, to prepare now for the kind of Ukraine that the people would like to live in once this war is over. There will be a better future. For this, human rights must be the guide. This means building social cohesion among the different communities and ensuring the rights of the most vulnerable, ensuring equal access to the distribution of essential services for those most in need, including people with disabilities and older people, with women among the most deeply affected and without discrimination. It means ensuring a fully functioning judicial system that delivers fair trials and justice to the people, ensuring that allegations of violations, recent violations and since 2014 are acted upon with urgency and transparency, investigated and followed through with prosecutions, ensuring that laws under consideration are fully in line with international human rights standards. Civil society must be free to thrive, express their opinions, and to help build a society that is strong through diversity. I have been encouraged by the openness of the authorities and their engagement with my office, with the monitoring mission here in Ukraine. In addition to our monitoring work, we have also been providing advice on laws that require amendment, including law number 2108-9, which in March introduced criminal liability for collaborating with an aggressor state. The law contains provisions that are vague while imposing harsh penalties. We are calling for it to be amended to bring it in line with international standards, as mentioned in my meeting with parliamentarians earlier this week. My office will also follow up on this very specific law with recommendations, but we have also shared our concerns with Parliament on the draft law on citizenship and the draft laws on media. My office in Ukraine has been working in an uninterrupted way since 2014, reporting, working with civil society, advising the government on compliance with international law, and responding also to our findings. Our mandate includes the monitoring and the reporting on all violations committed on the territory of Ukraine, irrespective of the perpetrator. It is important for us, not least because of this full responsibility, to have access to the occupied areas of Ukraine, from where we also continually receive report of violations. We have not had recent access, but are continuing to seek it. My representative here in Ukraine will now speak to you in more detail about our report on killings in northern Ukraine, the report that we're issuing today. And on my part, let me stress that the most effective way to stop the running catalogue of cruelty from continuing is to bring an end to this senseless war in line with the UN Charter and international law. My most fervent wish is for all people in Ukraine to enjoy the right to peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. By the end of October, our monitoring mission in Ukraine had documented cases of summary executions and attacks on individual civilians in 102 villages and towns of the 3 regions, Kiev, Chernigiv, and Sumy. The killings took place between the 24th of February and the 6th of April and were committed by Russian armed forces while they controlled these areas. We documented the deaths of 441 civilians, which includes 341 men, 72 women, 20 boys, and 8 girls. We are still in the process of corroborating an additional 198 alleged killings in these areas. The report and the accompanying annex examine the circumstances behind 100 of these killings in more detail. There are strong indications that the summary executions documented in the report may constitute the war crime of willful killing, as the circumstances surrounding these deaths suggest that Russian soldiers knew that they were targeting civilians but still used lethal force. A mere text message, a piece of camouflaged clothing, or a record of previous military service could have fatal consequences. Russian soldiers brought civilians to makeshift places of detention and then executed them in captivity. Many of the victims' bodies were found with their hands tied behind their backs and gunshot wounds to their heads. Some victims were summarily executed on the spot. Civilians were targeted on roads while moving within or between settlements, including while attempting to flee the hostilities. We found that most killings occurred in the town of Bucha, 5 kilometers northwest of Kiev. During 12 visits to Bucha, we documented the killings of 73 civilians between the 4th and the 30th of March. We are in the process of corroborating 105 additional alleged killings of civilians in the town. Very little has been achieved in holding both the direct perpetrators and their commanders accountable. The government of Ukraine is facing difficulties in investigating and prosecuting the crimes in light of the sheer volume of allegations and forensic challenges. To date, we have found no information that the Russian authorities have been actively investigating or prosecuting any of these cases. We reiterate our call for the Russian Federation to promptly investigate all violations of international law and to bring those responsible to justice. Thank you.
Thanks, Matilda. We can now take questions. We'll take them 3 at a time, just to allow as much time as possible, as many questions as possible to be asked. If you could please just identify yourself and the organization that you're with. Please go ahead.
No, sorry, I can't hear. I need a microphone. Будь ласка, no, I need a microphone. Please give the microphone to the person. I'm Dmitro Dituro, TV channel Espresso. Can you hear me now? Hello? I'm on the second channel. Can you hear me now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, two, three, four, five. English channel sound check. One, two, three, four, five. Can you hear me? Dmitro Didura, Espresso TV channel. Recently, the head of Lugansk military civilian administration published pictures of executions of civilians in Lugansk region, which is my hometown. Have you received those pictures? Have you talked to the local authorities about that? And do you already know about Lugansk region and the executions of civilians? Because there are a lot of allegations about that people are being targeted there too.
Thank you. Is there another question?
Thank you. Indra Sprans from Latvian Radio. I'm wondering, can you name a person or persons who are responsible for these killings? And if it's possible, another question. What would be the best way how to bring those criminals to the justice?
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
Доброго дня, мене звати Гузь.
I'm Guz Irina, journalist from Suspilne, public broadcaster. We want to ask about the execution of soldiers in Makivka. Have you verified videos? Are those videos true, where the Russian soldiers fired at those who wanted to surrender, and what would be the results of the investigation? And another question: the international human rights defending organization Amnesty International called the investigation of the ICC in Ukraine as a selective investigation. They say that the court denies justice to other countries while investigating into crimes in Ukraine. Is that correct, or is it just Russian narrative?
I will ask the High Commissioner as well as Ms. Bogner to respond to some of your more specific queries. High Commissioner, would you like to start?
And obviously my representative will answer in a most detailed manner. On the first question on Luhansk, I mean, one of the big issues for us is actually to have access to the eastern, to the occupied territories, and as long as we're not able to have access, it's actually very difficult, but we continue receiving reports. But access is really crucial for us. In terms of names of persons who are responsible for the killing, we are not doing criminal investigations. We have obviously identified and verified these killings, but we are not able to say who the people actually are. That's a criminal investigation that is done by both the Ukrainian authorities, because they have obviously started a lot of investigations, and also by the other accountability mechanisms such as the International Criminal Court. On the videos, yes, they appear to be authentic, but we obviously don't know what happened, and this does require much further work, and one would need to. And we were assured, I was told by the authorities here, that they have started investigations themselves. On ICC, yes, the ICC has a responsibility that applies to all countries where ICC jurisdiction is there, and obviously that applies to the whole world, where indeed the country has ratified the ICC statute. But it also applies here because of the particular circumstances, and it is important, though, that also national systems are reinforced, as I mentioned in my statement, because with the amount of cases that you have here, you will need a lot of strengthening of that side. And I had a very good discussion with the Prosecutor General about this.
Thank you. On the first question regarding execution of civilians in Lugansk, when we receive information, we look into all allegations of summary executions and other killings of civilians. We do have information about other summary executions and targeted killings of civilians in other areas, not only in the 3 areas that are documented in the report. And we have been collecting information, including in the Kharkov region, including in Kherson region and other areas of the country. The report focuses in on these 3 particular regions, Kiev, Chernigiv and Sumy, because we have had access to there since April of this year, and that has allowed us the time to look in depth at killings. We need to make sure that we fully corroborate the information that we receive, and this does take time, and that's why the report focuses on these areas. But we will continue to publish and report on information around other allegations as soon as we have been able to corroborate them. In terms of perpetrators, as the High Commissioner said, it is other bodies that are looking very closely at exactly perpetrators. What we can say is that the victims and witnesses were usually not aware of the identity of the perpetrator. They could describe certain details and features such as their ethnicity, the language that they were speaking, some signs in terms of uniforms that they were wearing, but they would not have details such as the name, the rank, and so on, usually of perpetrators. So we mainly based our information on interviews with victims and witnesses. We did also look, and it is included in our report, at which units of the armed forces were in those areas. So we do have information about the units that were there. But in terms of matching that with the specific individual perpetrators, we haven't been able to go that far at this stage. But I certainly know that the authorities who are investigating do have some of that information. And I think the High Commissioner answered in relation to the third question.
Thanks. Any further questions? Yeah. Let's go to the front first, and then oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jamie, Associated Press. I just wanted to try to put this into a wider perspective. Obviously, you're talking about 3 different regions. I mean, how much is this representative of the overall picture of, and you know, how much of this is really just a drop in the bucket compared to the total number of you know, rights violations and possible war crimes in Ukraine?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The last one. I'm just wondering, did you saw signs of genocide?
Sorry?
Signs of genocide.
Genocide.
Okay, High Commissioner.
No, I think the way that the office works is to actually undertake very detailed account of both, as my representative said, of both witness statements, also inquiries on location, and making sure that, you know, we verify, document what has happened. This obviously takes time. We are not always the first ones. We are often there very early on. I mean, in Bucha, for example, we went there within a week. I think we had a presence there. But in order to go into the actual details of it, you need time. What we have seen emerging as a picture, and I just, yesterday we were in Izum, which was a recently liberated area. You have, and we continue receiving reports about summary executions, enforced disappearances, and people who, for instance, destruction of hospitals and schools, and the type of what I mentioned about the multi-story building, that there was a multi-story building destroyed with 50 people dead, at least 50 people, because we don't exactly know, there may have been more, but some of it was so destroyed that you couldn't identify that. So there are indications of a pattern that is very troublesome. And on genocide, we are focusing on the documentation of what we see on the ground. And so as we were saying in this case, the war crime of willful killing is one where we've had very strong indications. To go into the whole very complex legal determination whether something is genocide is not what we are able to do. That is for a court to decide, but not for us to be able to say.
Ms. Bogner, would you like to supplement? Yeah.
Just to say on the situation of summary executions and targeted killings, as the High Commissioner said, we are looking in other areas. We do see, we have been documenting cases of summary executions in the Kharkiv region, for example, in the Kherson region. What I can say, what our report finds, is that Bucha was had unusually high level of summary executions. It was a real point where we saw very high numbers of summary executions. We did not see such high numbers in the other areas, which is not to say that there aren't cases. There are cases, and we will document them. I do hope that our ongoing work will not find a repeat of what happened in Bucha. But time will tell. We will see over time the exact scale.
Thank you, Matilda. We have time for one or two more questions, if there are any in the room. No? All clear? Thank you for coming. The statement will be sent to you by email, as will the press release linked to the killings report. Thank you very much, everyone.